Mr. Edwards, we hear from people at the administration, nobody under $400,000 is going to affect by all this additional money we put into the IRS. But at a recent hearing, Commissioner Werfel stated that this threshold will be based on total positive income, which is a measure of income that excludes losses. So won't basing the audit threshold on total positive income result in significantly larger audit pools than if the IRS used adjusted gross income or taxable income? Isn't this particularly true for small business owners?
Right, so the administration has promised that they won't increase audit rates for folks who earn under $400,000 a year. But my understanding is, the IRS uses the total positive income metric to target their normal auditing, and so when the commissioner says that uses the $400,000, he's actually talking, as you said, about a broader pool, mainly small, mid-sized businesses who actually may have AGI under $400,000. But if they're looking at positive income without losses, you're going to get a much bigger pool. I haven't done the math to figure out exactly how many returns that is, but there will be a broader pool of businesses who are audited than just thinking about the $400,000 as if it was AGI.
Mr. Sepp, I was a member of the 1998 IRS Restructuring Commission, and that act, IRS received multiple years of funding to upgrade its information technology. This funding was supposed to enable the IRS to replace its outdated individual master file and business master file, which still use technology dating back to the 60s. However, that attempt was plagued by cost overruns, lack of functionality, and to this day, the legacy system persists. What steps could be taken, whether by IRS or Congress, to ensure that we don't end up 2 decades from now with the same legacy systems?
Well, thank you, Senator. Yes, the individual master file is probably the central core of IRS data that needs to be upgraded and replaced. The Commissioner has set a very ambitious goal of trying to do that in the next few years. That could very well get delayed. We saw a $4 billion attempt in the late 80s and early 90s to try and update IMF. There was the enterprise case management system where IRS basically ignored the advice of technological experts who were saying you're focusing on the wrong kind of contract and the wrong kind of upgrade. I would say that even though the IRS now has a CIO, a Chief Information Officer, we've got an acting one right now, which is not ideal. You should really have a permanent one in place. But I would refrain that having consistent managerial oversight through something like the IRS Oversight Board that you and my boss worked on and the IRS Restructuring Commission would be ideal. And in fact, I know that there has been work done behind the scenes with members of this committee to try and make sure we never have this quorum problem with the board again. That would be well worth looking at to make sure we have managerial consistency when these upgrades are made. And frankly, there's not enough money for business systems modernization in the IRA funding mix. The projections are we'll burn through about 1/3 of that before another 2 fiscal years have passed. That money's not going to be around for the upgrades, and it's a key foundation for everything else the IRS wants to do.
Mr. Edwards, we often hear from people that are behind this massive amount of money that's going to be given to the IRS that anyone who's not a tax sheet has nothing to worry about from increased IRS enforcement. Even if an audit results in no additional taxes due, a taxpayer can still spend countless hours and incur significant costs responding to the IRS. Can you discuss the costs and burdens an IRS audit imposes on even an innocent taxpayer?
Well, that's right. That's one of the downsides of increased enforcement is that the IRS makes lots of mistakes. And, you know, I cited the statistic, for example, that if you look at tax court cases over the last 5 years, the IRS gets it wrong about half the time. The court decides that the IRS only got about 48% of the money that they had demanded. And that's, you know, and that's after, you know, the audit and appeal. The IRS brings these cases are brought to court, and the IRS only gets about half of the money. So there's a lot of false positives, I guess you could say, in IRS enforcement. And the more enforcing you do, the broader the pool of enforcement, the more mistakes the IRS is going to make. And it causes, you know, especially for 30 million small businesses, a lot of headaches and wasted time and effort defending against the IRS when you know, people have done nothing wrong. So I had my own issue with the IRS that lasted. It took me about a year to handle. I had to hire lawyers, and I found out through that process that the IRS makes lots of mistakes. They misfile forms. The groups within IRS don't talk to each other. You can't get anyone on the phone. I could have resolved my issue in 15 minutes on the phone with an IRS employee. I had to hire a law firm, spend thousands of dollars to get the problem solved. I ultimately had to get the National Taxpayer Advocate to come to my aid, and we solved the problem. But it just struck me that a lot of this is actually not, it doesn't have to do with money, it has to do with management in the IRS, sharing data, having a common database, being able to call and get someone on the phone like an airline reservation system where they have your information in front of them, and you know, and being able to solve, they'd be able to solve the problem a lot
The time of my colleagues expired.